Today's episode is brought to you by FirmTech. I'm Dave. I'm your host, and today, if you could see by the thumbnail, doing a piece on Charlie Kirk. And I'll be honest, I like to keep myself walled off from anything that's going to spike my emotions and get me fired up. I get fired up enough as is, just with what's going on in here. I don't need an external source doing that. But that being said, I want to get into a few things, a list of 4 points that I wanted to just express that these things I think need to be said, and especially from my point of view, from a veteran point of view, and from a Canadian point of view, that don't seem to be brought up. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to all those that are members here of the show. If you guys are not members yet, please consider becoming a member. It helps with production and ensuring that the show gets a lot more visibility. Whether it's $2.99 or more, believe it or not, it goes a long way to getting this show to the next level. And I want to ensure that you guys get the best quality guests and the best quality production value every time you tune in here. So please consider becoming a member or clicking the link here in the description to become a member of my Substack newsletter. All right, so let's hop right into the first point that I want to make. The first point I want to make on all this is that he was assassinated for what he had to say. We can likely assume that Charlie didn't bully the assassin in high school and take his lunch money. Charlie was not some king or dictator that was moving his armies into foreign lands and taking property and raising entire villages and taking its women and children. Like, this wasn't what he was doing. So the hatred is 100% due to what he had to say. The attack was due based on what he had to say. Words have a profound effect on the way we think. And since the dawn of civilization, kings and queens and dictators and authoritarians try to control how you think. That's why they burn books. That's why they eliminate art. That's why they kill dissenters. So the awakening happens often when somebody says the truthful thing out loud. And in Charlie's case, he was bringing up things that, for me, have been true for a long time. Family values matter. Christian values matter. I consider myself a Christian, and I've had an awakening in the last year. These are the things that I hold true that have seemed to have been downplayed and vilified over the last few years. And so the main point I'm trying to make here is that it's not a left versus right issue. And that's what I hope we start to realize. This is far from a left versus right issue. A left versus right issue is manufactured, okay? I have more in common with the blue-haired HR manager named Judy, who's an NDP supporter, than Elon Musk, Mark Carney, all of these higher-ups that pull the strings behind the curtains. And that reality is something that is hard for people to accept. Your conspiracy theorist, Trump supporting uncle and blue-haired Judy have way more in common. But what do we feel now? We have this sense that, nope, I can't possibly have anything in common with them. I hate them. Today, I had a blue-haired cashier at Costco. That's interesting. I was like, hey, dude, what's up? Yeah, hey, I'm doing good, man. What do you do on the weekend? Now, blue hair is likely a sign, this is assumption, that he's a little bit on the left-leaning side of things. But I could be wrong. But we can have a good conversation, even if it's at the checkout aisle of Costco. I told him, yeah, man, I'm a dad. I think I'm going to take it easy this weekend. He's like, oh, right on. I'm like, what are you up to? These are the common interactions that are normal, but have been meant to feel almost foreign. And we can see the comments on Twitter by university professors here in Canada that are disgusting, that are talking about killing more right-wing people. How can we possibly bring the divide together? Guys, help me in the comments. What do you guys think? Are we being divided on purpose? Point number 2, the media has created this assassination culture. I'll explain it this way. When Trump had his assassination attempt, members of my family openly and brazenly just said, I wish they had hit the mark. These are members of my family that I love dearly. And my reaction was like, I never want to hear that come out of your mouth again, especially around my children. Are you advocating for the murder of another human being? And this is coming from my family, people that I care for, people I never thought would ever say something like that. How did we get to that point where baby boomers who have never seen conflict, who have never seen death, destruction, and mayhem would advocate for the death of a sitting president? It still rattles me that came out of their mouths. And it continues to come out of a lot of people's mouths. And a lot of times this is in direct contradiction to their quote unquote Christian values. I approach this mostly with love, and I do not want to judge because that's not my responsibility. But it is disconcerting, 100%. And the point I want to make here is that this follows with the years of COVID nonsense where, again, members of my family were on board with internment camps for the unvaccinated. So we've already seen the media has created this awful, toxic environment where there is a group of people that are quote unquote clean or virtuous and they're good, and a bunch of unwanted, unclean people that are deemed to be expendable and not to be tolerated, to quote my prime minister back in the day, where Trudeau said people that hold these beliefs are not to be tolerated here in Canada. Like I said earlier, words matter. They truly do matter because they start affecting the consciousness. And those words start to rattle around in your mind and you still got to digest them. And if you get them hammered at you long enough, like a psyop, they will start affecting your beliefs and your values if you don't have a strong value-based system. And in my case, that's why I went back to Christianity, because I recognized, oh shit, I'm worshiping false idols. Shit, I'm judging people. Oh shit, when I do stuff, I don't have love in my heart. I need to be external of this political nonsense. And so that's my rationale. Maybe yours is different. Drop it in the comments. But it reminds me of the 2 Minutes of Hate from 1984. If you've ever read or watched the movie 1984 by George Orwell, there's a very poignant moment that is really eerily close to what we're experiencing these days, where every citizen had to go do a 2 minutes of hate towards, in this case, Goldstein, who is like the external boogeyman. And you had to really get into it because the agents were watching. Like if you weren't truly expressing hatred toward this external enemy, you were looked upon as, you're pretty suspicious. Why don't you hate as much as you should? Which takes away from the internal struggle that should be happening within the state, because they've eliminated your ability to be a free human. But they justify it with this 2 minutes of hate and this big brother system that is there to look out for you, that is there to provide for you. And the reason why we have to do all this is because of that external boogeyman. And who's that external boogeyman these days? Where's the 2 minutes of hate coming from? It's the media. It's the mainstream stuff that I see when I go to my family's house, that I see when anybody typically over the age of 60 has on their TV screens. They're watching a nonstop slow drip of hatred that slowly brings them closer and closer to this idea that, yes, somebody deserves to die because this can't go on anymore. If you go on Twitter these days, it's an orgy of people just wanting as much violence and chaos as humanly possible, putting people on hit lists. And the irony is, these are the people that are least likely, in my opinion, to actually be able to use violence. They're the weak people, the weak men that have no idea what violence is. They're likely not on the jiu-jitsu mats. They're likely not the ones that were sweating their balls off fighting the Taliban and ISIS during the last 20 years. They're the ones that got the privileged, cushy life of going to university, not getting calluses on their hands, and tweeting. They're the ones that will gladly put one in somebody's dome because they disagree with them, but not themselves, though. They'll find somebody else to do it. They'll find somebody else like the terrorists, the Hamas types, the jihadis that will gladly do their dirty work, right? And that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And then when words are recategorized as violence, And we see this now. Words can be seen as violent. They can be seen as hateful. Hateful falls right into our hate speech laws. If you say something that is hateful, well, what is hateful? Initially, it was like, well, you can't say, I want to kill somebody. Okay, cool. Or a group of people. Okay. But now it's starting to morph. And in your mind, if you're like, well, words are violence, then the reciprocal action could be actual violence. Because logically, like you're committing a violent act against me, which is making me feel uncomfortable. It's not physically beating me up. I'm saying something that confronts my belief system, or somebody's being mean to me. Well, that's violent. So therefore, I have every justification in my mind, because I've been told that that's the case, that I can commit an act of violence, actual violence. That's what I'm saying. And then point 3, the real enemy is again, not Trump. It's not blue hair Judy. It's the powers that be that are pulling the strings. I guarantee you, if you go have a conversation with that person and you're like, I don't know about that guy, you'll have a bunch of commonalities. One thing I learned in Afghanistan is that pretty much everybody have the exact same fundamental wants and needs. They want to be well fed. They want to have a half decent roof over their heads, and they want to have protection and safety for their families. That's it. Now, the differences here are, how do we go about that? How do we go about getting those basic needs and wants covered off? That's where we get into ideologies. Okay, fair enough. But if you can understand that at a fundamental level and come to the conversation with like, well, they're just trying to get their needs met. Okay, and I'm trying to get my needs met. Well, then maybe we can have a conversation, because we can have this common ground. Like, hey, maybe we all like football. Fuck, I don't know. Maybe we all like the Montreal Canadiens. Well, there's some common ground. You're not so bad. That's how I feel I grew up. And especially being in the unit that I grew up in, we challenged our ideas often loudly and drunkenly in the mess. And that was a hell of a good time. But who are the real enemies? Because we have to think, you have to use the Latin term, qui bono. Who would benefit from a guy like Charlie Kirk being assassinated? I'm racking my brain here, but it doesn't seem like the common man benefits from Charlie Kirk being assassinated. It doesn't seem like the left benefits. Does the right benefit from losing one of its pundits or one of its thought leaders? I don't think so. So who benefits from this? And whenever there's a civil unrest, when there's division, it's not the people that are fighting that are benefiting. It's the people that benefit from the fighting that are benefiting. If a war starts, if a civil war starts, are any of these leaders going to be in the labs, in the tanks, on the front lines leading the charge? Absolutely freaking not. Are the cabinet ministers going to be there? No, of course they're not going to be there. Who's going to be there? Us, fighting it out like dummies. I saw war. It freaked me the fuck out. I don't want war here. Those that haven't experienced war are the most likely to actively try and pursue it. And I'm telling you, if you're not a combat veteran, listen, you do not want this to escalate. You do not want more assassinations. You do not want people going down for what they have to say. That's the point of free speech. It keeps the tyrant at bay. Afghanistan is a disaster. It has been for decades. And it's because of the ideologies during the 60s and 70s that took root and destroyed a beautiful, progressive country. Curious to know what you guys think. You guys drop them in the comments here. My last point, Ray Dalio is a hedge fund executive. He created his own fund. I follow him quite closely. He's written a few books, and he's written about how empires fail, how they end. And he ties it into financial markets and the money cycle, but also internally, what does this look like? In his book, Principles, which you should go check out if you're interested in this kind of stuff, his model for the rise and fall of empires uses a few models. He uses the Dutch, the Romans, the Americans, and the French as case studies. He lays out the point that every empire goes through a few phases. They become super productive, and they start to rise, and they get super prosperous, and everybody's happy. But then it gets to a point where the pie, so to speak, isn't growing anymore. So those that have start to get more. So it's the Matthew principle. Those that have will continue to get more, and those that have not will continue to have less. And because of that, divisions start to happen. And because of that, more conflicts start to happen. The state starts to weaken. Once the state starts to weaken, other competitors start realizing this is an opportunity and start taking shots at that state. The way he outlines it now is that the political gaps now in the US have essentially become almost unmendable. They're too far apart. And in Canada as well. I think that the divide now between like liberal and conservative it echoes what's going on in the United States. And that being said, once you end up in this position, the inevitability of a culture war, which is what we're in the middle of, creates the loss of trust in institutions because ultimately people are realizing either consciously or subconsciously that they are not getting as much of the pie as they should for the amount of labor that they're putting into the market. And then they go, well, that's your fault. No. The other side said, no, that's your fault. So this is the left-right divide. But think of who would benefit from causing that divide to be even wider. It's not the people on the left and the right. It's the people at the top that have the bigger pieces of the pie. But it's coming to that middle ground, like I talked about, that would end up creating that divide to close. Realizing, wait, it's not between me and you, it's between us and them. So I'll just end with this, guys. Charlie Kirk, from what I could see, was a nobleman. He put his thoughts out there, which is always dangerous. But at the end of the day, I think he came from a good place. He was trying to mend the divide between left and right. His actions speak louder than his words. Actions are what you need to judge somebody on. Not their words per se, but what they actually do. And he showed up, man. It must have sucked being in front of all those people, calling them names, being just an asshole to him, but he kept on coming back. And that's what made him so popular. He was trying to mend a divide. And in his words, he was saying, we need to ensure the debate keeps on happening because once the debate stops, the violence starts. And I can't agree with him more. So that being said, last quote from George Orwell, just to tie things back together to 1984. The further society drifts from the truth, the more we'll hate those who speak it. That's it for me, folks. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a comment. Make sure to obliterate the subscribe button. It helps grow the show and believe it or not, helps me feel a lot better about myself about doing these things. So let's pray for Charlie's family with two beautiful kids. Unfortunately, they no longer have a father. And let's put an end to the violence and come to a common ground. That's my hope and that's my prayer. So enjoy the rest of the week, guys. Enjoy your weekend. I hope you have a beautiful one and train hard, fight easy. See you on the next one. Peace.